Hello children, in today's class we are going to study Nani by Kamala. I believe Kamala is a known writer to you. Kamala was born in Kerala to illustrious parents. She wrote both in her mother tongue and English. Her childhood was split between her ancestral village in Kerala and Kolkata. So this rootlessness and the subsequent impact the child has on a child's psychology plays an extremely important role in her poetry. And her autobiography, it is titled My Story, was daring in its frankness and lent a distinctive voice to a woman's search for emotional sustenance. And Kamala's first book of poetry, that is Summer in Calcutta, was aesthetically refreshing. The confessional nature of her poetry and the directness of her voice led to her being compared to poets like Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath is an American poet. And Kamala is one of the first modern poets in Indian writing in English who sought for an independent poetic self. And in her novels, her female characters were not satisfied with mere physical sexuality, but also desired psychological intimacy and dignity. Kamala was a prolific writer credited with many collections of short stories and poems. She also wrote 6 novels and 3 memoirs. Most of her fictional writings are in her mother tongue, Malayalam. And coming to this poem, particular poem, Nani. So, Nani means a maid. The poem Nani, this is culled from the old playhouse and other poems. And this particular poem Nani is about the death of a servant girl. Okay, so the poem is about the death of a servant girl. So Nani, the maid, is found hanging in the privy, which the poet ironically says becomes a shrine. And everybody, including the grandmother, is dismissive of Nani and her memory. But the poet Kamala, she refuses to be part of the self-assured and unquestioning lot around her. She actually probes into the mystery of Nani with her imagination. So if you see this poem, Nani is confessional in nature and an honest expression of the concerns of the female self. Sharing the image of Dalit women. So this is the poem. The poem Nani is divided into 3 parts. So the first 8 lines actually describes the day when Nani, that is the maid, committed suicide by hanging. And the next 9 to 18 lines describes the day, that is after 1 or 2 years, when the poet happens to ask her grandmother about Nani. And the last section, third section, starting from 19 to 29 lines, describes the poet's views that one cannot just forget something though they pretend to forget it. So these are the 3 divisions. As I said, the poem is divided into 3 parts. First 1 to 8 lines, second 9 to 18 lines, third section 19 to 29 lines. Let me read out the poem for you. Nani, the pregnant maid, hanged herself in the privy one day. For 3 long hours, until the police came, she was hanging there, a clumsy puppet. And when the wind blew, turning her gently on the rope, it seemed to us who were children then that Nani was doing to delight us a comic dance. The chirps grew fast. Before the summer's end, the yellow flowers had hugged the doorway and the walls. The privy, so abandoned, became an altar then, a lonely shrine for a goddess who was dead. Another year or two, and I asked my grandmother one day, "Don't you remember Nani, the dark, plump one who bathed me near the well?" Grandmother shifted the reading glasses on her nose and stared at me. "Nani?" she asked. "Who is she?" With that question ended Nani. So each truth ends thus with a query. It is this designated deafness that turns mortality into immortality, the definite into the sought indefinite. They are lucky who ask questions and move on before the answers come. Those wise ones who reside in a blue silent zone, unscratched by doubts, for theirs is the clotted peace embedded in life, like music in the quail's egg, or like lust in the blood, or like the sap in a tree. By Kamala. See, how does the poem begin? The poem, Nani, it begins stating that the maid has committed suicide. So Nani is a symbolic poem. The poem shows the problem risen due to casteism and indifference towards the woman figure. So Nani is a maid who worked for Kamala's family at the time when Kamala was a child. Okay, so who is Nani? Nani is a maid who worked for Kamala's family at the time when Kamala was a kid. And what happened to that Nani? One day, Nani, the maid, she hanged herself to death in the privy. So what is a privy? Privy is nothing but it is a toilet. Okay, what is privy? Privy, a toilet. So she hanged herself inside or in that toilet. And we do not know the reason. Why did she committed suicide? Why did this young girl Nani, she committed suicide? We do not know. But it is mentioned in the first line, she was pregnant. So it's given like, see, Nani, the pregnant maid, hanged herself. So the implication here is she would have committed suicide because, working Dalit class women cannot take the burden of having a child. And that would have made her, so she would have been, because she will not be able to provide for the child. So she would have committed suicide. Or other sources suggest that the maid would have gotten pregnant from sexual abuse by her master. So this also could be the reason for her suicide. So I'm reading out the poem. The first part, Nani, the pregnant maid, hanged herself in the privy one day. So for 3 long hours until the police came, she was hanging there, and she looked like a clumsy puppet when the wind blew, turning her gently on the rope. And it seemed to the children, it is to Kamala Das, that Nani was doing to delight us a comic dance. The children at home, they thought that Nani was doing a comic dance to entertain the children. And the chirps grew fast before the summer's end. The yellow flowers had hugged the doorway and the walls. And the privy, the toilet where she committed suicide, later it was abandoned. It was not used by the family members, and it became an altar then, a lonely shrine for a goddess who was dead. So which is a lonely shrine here? Privy, a toilet where the lady hanged herself, and that has become a shrine today. And she is considered as the maid is considered as a goddess who was dead. So the poem Nani is actually a protest poem which reveals the cruelty of rich feudal towards the poor. Because this lady maid is a Dalit woman. So she was abused, she might be raped by the master. So that is also discussed in the poem. So Nani, the maid, symbolizes poor, marginalized and victimized women in the feudal world. So if you see in the poem, Nani was a maid and she was working in the house of the poet. And when the poet was young, so being pregnant, she committed suicide, as I said, probably fearing that she might not be able to feed her child, or she might have been raped by the landlord. So these two could be the reasons. So she committed suicide. And the poet says that being young, the poet thought Nani might be amusing them while she was hanging dead. And she was there for 3 long hours until the police came. So the poet Kamala Das was young, and she thought that the maid might be amusing them while she was hanging dead. And it seemed to us who were children then, because she was a child, that Nani was doing to delight as a comic dancer. And she is called as a clumsy puppet. Nani is here referred to a clumsy puppet. The poet, being a child at the time, could not understand what happened in the house. Why did the lady commit suicide and what happened to her? She doesn't know. She was ignorant, or she was, too young to understand all these things. So, Kamala Das assumed that Nani was playing a puppet game of some sort. And the use of this word puppet is symbolism to Nani's job, as Nani was only a puppet. So all maids were used only as puppets by the landlords. So Nani was here only a puppet to the family she worked for. So I stop here. Meet you next class. Thank you.